Hello, everyone. This is Griffin the Hansen, and welcome to the second episode of AEA Talks. This is a new series that I'm doing where my organization, the Animation Education Association, records interviews with notable people in the animation industry, and of course, puts them here on YouTube for free for your educational or leisurely listening purposes. I'm very excited that today I had the opportunity to talk with Tomm Moore. Tomm Moore is one of the co-founders of Cartoon Saloon, Ireland's premier animation studio, and he's co-directed films like The Secret of Kells, Wolfwalkers, and my favorite, Song of the Sea. Now, this is an episode that we recorded a few months back, but I had to sort of keep it in the queue because of the release of Razors. Even still, everything we say here is not spoiled by time, I'm sure. If anything, it's only ripened. So please enjoy my conversation with Tomm Moore. Well, the first thing I wanted to go over is probably the most important thing of all, which is that my mother spends a lot of time in Ireland, and when I told her that I was talking to someone from Kilkenny, she said I had to bring up Smithwick's Red Ale, which is her absolute favorite.
That's the stuff. Unfortunately, brewed in Dublin now, but it was brewed in Kilkenny for hundreds of years. But then Guinness bought the brewery, and now it's made in Dublin. But yeah, it's Kilkenny beer. Yeah.
I don't want to give them a advertisement that they didn't pay for or anything. But are you a fan of Smithwick's?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So speaking of Ireland, of course, that's going to come up a lot in our interview. You are from Ireland. You're from Northern Ireland. That is the country of Northern Ireland. And when you were a young man, you moved to Ireland proper. Was there anything that initiated your family's move to the country of Ireland?
Oh yeah, when I was very young, I was just starting school, so it was a long time ago. My dad was he got a job down south, and then when he moved down south, because of the troubles and everything up north, he never really wanted to move back up again because he was afraid something could happen to us if we moved back up north. So yeah, the north of Ireland was, especially in the 80s, was very troubled. Yeah,
And it's interesting you mentioned the troubles. As somebody from Northern Ireland, to move to Ireland proper, did you ever face any sort of discrimination because of where you're from?
I was very young. I remember I purposefully lost my accent. I didn't want to sound different to the other kids in school, so I lost my accent and learned to blend in. And now I kind of have this echolalia, they call it, where I can pick up other people's accents pretty easily, you know.
Really? I suppose I have to hope that mine isn't too annoying then.
No, not at all. I have to be careful I don't pick up your accent.
We'll see. We'll see by the end of our talk. What was it like then, as a young man in the 1980s, growing up in Ireland proper, and hearing about what was happening in Northern Ireland, especially with your family having some connection there?
Yeah, and I would have spent a lot of time there in the summers and at Christmas and stuff like that. So I was always very conscious of the troubles and what was going on. And every time there was a ceasefire, you would hope that would be it, but then it would always start again. And I remember the peace process in the late 90s, and that was a big change. I was really conscious of that. It was a big moment in history, all right. But most of my life, I was pretty blissfully most of my time I was in Kilkenny. I was down in the south, and I was busy growing up here down in the south, and I wasn't thinking about the north that much, but I was always aware of it. And I suppose there's an extra appreciation of being Irish. If you're on the Republican side of the divide in the north, you're maybe more about being Irish than you are if you're just from the south, you know, because you don't have any opposition. If you're in the south, it's just what you are. In the north, you had to kind of fight for that identity, so there was a stronger connection or a stronger idea. I remember like my uncles and stuff being very proud to learn the Irish language, and it was a big deal. You know, it was a statement to call your children a traditional Irish name or whatever. So I suppose I had a certain awareness of a certain concept of Irishness that comes from Northern Ireland. It's a bit different than what you have if you grow up in the south and you never have any contact with the north, you know.
And now you have children. Do you feel like the way that your children are raised understanding Irish identity is much different than how you were raised understanding Irish identity?
It's a good question. I have a 30-year-old son. He went to Irish language school when he was studying, when he was in school. So I hope he had a more organic, less kind of aware, but just an organic sense of Irishness. And then my granddaughter is 7 now, and so she's not attending an Irish language school, but I think she has a much more casual attitude to her Irishness, a much less pronounced, much less aware of Irishness, and it's just something organic for her. I think for my son and my granddaughter, it was something much more organic than it was for me.
And speaking of the organic Irish experience, was religion a big part of your life as a young man?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As a kid, Catholicism, and my mum was very involved in the church, and I think Northern Irish Catholics are super Catholic. You know, they're extra Catholic.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
special Catholic.
Exactly. They're Catholic because they're not Protestants. So yeah, I suppose there would have been a lot of religiosity in the house, and a lot of in my upbringing, I would have been very conscious of being Catholic and going to mass a lot and being involved in all the sacraments and everything. I kind of became pretty lapsed as I got older, and my mum kind of drifted away from it a bit too.
It's funny you mentioned drifting away from it when you get older, because of course your films are very steeped in Irish heritage. Do you feel like there's any semblance of religion in your work? Because there's not crosses, and there's not, they don't meet the Pope or anything like that.
No, but I think especially Secret of Kells was very much coming from that tradition, that sort of Irish Catholic tradition, it was even pre-Catholic. I mean, what was happening in the country at the time that Secret of Kells was set in was this kind of Celtic Christianity, and I would have been very conscious of but yeah, I mean, our first feature film was about monks in an abbey, and interacting with like pagan deities and pagan characters like Aisling. So there was and then in Song of the Sea, I think I really wanted to point to stuff I would have grown up with, like the Holy Wells, which are kind of ancient sites that are built on pagan sites, but now they're Catholic. So there's this kind of syncretism in Ireland between the Catholicism and paganism, where they kind of not too far under the surface of a lot of Catholic important places in Christian thought are pagan. Like they're places that were important to spiritually important places even before Christianity, and then Christianity just sort of subsumed them into their pantheon.
Paul Young, who is one of the co-founders of Cartoon Saloon, which you know, but for the people at home, he once said that Ireland is unique in the way that, and this is a loose paraphrase, Ireland is unique in the way that the people of Ireland hold superstition and legend to a degree that people in other countries don't. Do you feel that that's true?
I guess so, but what I'm finding really fascinating is in my research for my new film that there's a very similar way of seeing the world that I'm discovering amongst, like at the moment I'm researching like the Choctaw Indians from Oklahoma and Mississippi and stuff, and I've talked to some old people in those communities, and they would have been very similar to my grandparents, the way they would have believed. You know, they have their own belief system, their own traditional belief system that coexists fairly seamlessly with their Christian worldview that they have as well. And I suppose in particular in Ireland it was maintained for longer than in other countries, but from my understanding and my experience of it, I think that's happened in different parts of the world in different ways. So it's really interesting for me to see where there's commonality with other cultures actually.
You mentioned the Choctaw Indians. I don't want to spoil anything with this upcoming development, but do you find inspiration specifically from Irish culture in a way that you don't from the culture of America or Native Americans or other places?
Oh, well, what I'm looking at the moment is where Irish people have intersected with other cultures, where they're doing their stories all over the world, because there's been such a diaspora of Irish people emigrating for so long that there's stories from all over the world where Irish people encountered other cultures and the similarities and the contrasts and stuff. I find that really interesting. I mean, up until now, I did 3 films that were really based in Irish folklore and Irish history and stuff.
Yeah.
And now what I'm more looking at is where Irish people intersect it with other cultures.
When you get interviewed by a lot of people, one of the first things they ask is this, that, or the other thing about Ireland, and they really, really dive deep into your fascination with yours and Nora's and Paul's fascination with Ireland and so on and so forth. Do you ever feel like people's focus with only talking about Ireland with you somehow inhibits you to be able to discuss topics that you really want to get into about larger ideas that you have, or are you very proud of the fact that you've helped rejuvenate Irish folklore?
I would say I am proud. It's something that we can offer uniquely, so I think it's something that we'd be proud of and very conscious of, that we've kind of delved pretty quick into Irish culture. And generally we get to talk about universal stuff as well. It seems like the specificity of the cultural aspects of our work hasn't precluded us from telling more universal stories or dealing with more universal themes, I don't think.
I agree. I don't think anybody's head blew up when the Breadwinner came out, and of course that's about an Afghani woman.
Yeah, exactly.
It seemed like people were pretty happy to accept it, and for what it's worth, I don't think Skunk Fu was a particularly Irish tale.
No, Kung Fu was a bit of it was a very different project, yeah.
So I want to go back to the idea of Irish names for a minute there, because your name is Thomas, but everybody knows you as Tomm with 2 M's, which is unique. Yeah. Where does Tomm with 2 M's come from?
That is something I stole from a comic book artist when I was a kid. There was a comic book artist called Tomm Coker, and I'd been called Tommy as a child, and so I decided to drop the Y and copy Tomm Coker. And I met him one time at a comic convention. We got a selfie together. I was like, "You spell your name with 2 M's, so do I." I copied it from you.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So you have talked a little bit about your childhood here. You've talked a little bit about your son, who I know is a big inspiration for Song of the Sea. I think he even has the same name.
Yeah,
and
right.
In Song of the Sea, I know that the mother and the sister are named after your mother and your sister as well. Do you feel like you pull from your childhood a lot in your work?
Oh yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just from people around me and people that I care about and stuff, I kind of have to pump a lot of the personality and a lot of traits from people I care about into these characters because I have to live with them for so long. So definitely there's a lot of even in the new movie I'm developing, there's a lot of my son in the one of the characters, and even though he's an adult now, but when he was younger, myself and my own childhood, and Robin in Wolfwalkers is very much based on my wife. Mm-hmm. She was a little girl, and now her granddaughter is getting older. She's starting to look more and more like Robin from Wolfwalkers. It's funny, and I've made my granddaughter the main character of my new film as well. So yeah, I think that's something I've been doing a lot.
As somebody who now has 3 generations that they've seen, well, I suppose 2 in your case, grow up, do you view your childhood differently now than you did when you were not a father or not a grandfather?
Well, these are deep questions. Yes, I do. I appreciate it more. I appreciate it more than maybe I did when I was younger. And now that I look at it and I see the stability that we had by moving down to the south, growing up in the south, I kind of understand that was quite a gift that my parents gave me. Mm-hmm. I think it was hard for them. I think especially my mum was homesick for the north, but the south was more stable.
Are they very supportive of your animation career?
Oh yeah, I'm super proud. I just had an exhibition the other day at the start of the Kilkenny Animated Festival here in Kilkenny, and I had an exhibition of my life drawing, and my mum and dad were there, very proud.
Well, in fairness, when it comes to the Kilkenny Animation Festival, I think Cartoon Saloon is probably a bit of a mainstay. It would be a little awkward if you guys didn't show up. The idea of Irish folklore, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but when you're making films so rooted in Irish culture and folklore, how do you personally balance putting in your artistic voice?
Oh, I think I felt a lot more comfortable when it was Irish folklore, because I felt like I could do my interpretation of it or my spin on it. You know, what I felt was, I felt very free. I had a lot of artistic license. I remember years and years ago talking to a storyteller called Eddie Lenihan, who used to be on the TV when I was a kid, and he's kind of the inspiration for the great Shanachie character in Song of the Sea. And he was the one who sort of said there are stories to retell for the audience that we're talking to, and that each time you retell the story, you can kind of adapt it and make it more your own and stuff. So that's something I felt pretty comfortable with the first 3 films.
But do you feel like you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to sacrifice either your own artistic expression or the integrity of the original text to make something that you're proud of?
I think it was very fluid. Like, there wasn't kind of like the stuff we were working with and stuff we were playing with wasn't gospel. You know, there was no one official text version of like the Wolves of Ossory or Selkie stories or any of that. So we were able to kind of go on the shopping trip, as it were, through the Irish folklore and take the bits that made most sense for adapting to the movies, you know.
So when you find yourself in a situation like that versus The Breadwinner or My Father's Dragon, which are based on books, does that elasticity go away to some extent?
To some extent, yeah. I haven't had to do that. Those were both directed by Nora, and she's got much more experience with adaptation and trying to find a way to put herself, and I think she successfully did with those, but she found a way to put her own point of view into those, but still trying to honour the books. But for me, I wouldn't be that keen on, unless there was a book I really fell in love with, I don't think I'd be that keen on adapting a book, you know. I think I like being able to tell original stories that I've made up myself, because it means there aren't fans of the original book or the original version, and you're not kind of rewriting it. But with my latest film that I'm working on, there's a kind of beloved folk memory of a gift that the Choctaw people gave to the Irish during the famine, and maybe even more significant than the money they sent was the letter saying that we were kindred spirits, that we were similar. And I'm very conscious I want to protect that folk memory, even if it's, you know, there's a certain reverence for it in Ireland, then in Cork, and then over in Oklahoma and Tuskahoma, they have a monument in memory of that, and I know that that's a very for both nations, that's a really important bond. So I'm kind of trying to celebrate that without writing anything too definitive or coming up with anything too definitive. It's just a story inspired by that bond, rather than actually trying to historically represent what happened. So I'm kind of dodging the bullet of a representation that way by making up my own story and telling it hopefully from an Irish point of view primarily.
Have you been to Oklahoma before?
Oh yeah, a couple of times now. Yeah, we were there. It was actually beautiful. We were there for the powwow last year for Labor Day, and they had a Labor Day powwow, and they unveiled the statue, which was a Choctaw artist had made, that was celebrating the link between Ireland and Choctaw Nation. Yeah.
Really? Where in Oklahoma was that?
Tuskahoma down near Durant, down in the south. Yeah.
I don't know it too well. I am working on, as part of the Animation Education Association's mission, we also install historical markers for people who are in the industry. And Mary Blair, the famous artist, she's from McAllister, Oklahoma. So we're doing a marker for her next year, but these markers take like 3 years to do. So I've been working with Oklahoma a lot.
I didn't realize Mary Blair was from Oklahoma. Yeah. That's really interesting. That's great. We also, there's a lot of connection down to Mississippi as well. That's where the Choctaw homeland is. That's where they were originally, Mississippi, Louisiana, and that was where they were kind of removed from and sent to Oklahoma. So most Choctaw people now live in Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma, but there's still reservations in Louisiana and Mississippi as well. So yeah, the connections it's amazing to me actually how strong the culture remains, especially down in Mississippi where the language is still spoken. And reminds me a lot of little pockets in Ireland called the Gaeltacht. There's little areas in Ireland where Irish language is still spoken. And the reservations in Mississippi really reminded me of that.
I don't live too far from Mississippi. I live in Georgia. And idea that a lot of American school children have, at least when they graduate from school, is they'll learn about something like the Trail of Tears, and they'll say, we didn't learn about this in school. We didn't learn about this, that, or the other thing. I suppose it depends on where you went to school, of course. But as somebody who went to school in an entirely different country, and for what it's worth, I'm from America, and they never taught us about Irish history in school. Apologies. How does somebody like you come to learn about something like the Trail of Tears?
Oh, that was something that came up during the COVID. During the COVID pandemic, there was a big fundraiser for Hopi and Navajo people, and then there was a kind of flurry of documentaries and TV programs and things came out about the Irish connection to Native Americans, particularly the Choctaw, but also the Ojibwe and the Mohawk and Cree, and there's a lot of different connections, and they're really fascinating. And so there was kind of a general fascination, I feel, during the pandemic with this, because the fundraiser that was going on, and it was kind of a reminder that we have this kind of connection going back a long time. And so that's when I first came across it, and then I started reading books about it, and I read Inconvenient Indian, and different books from all about that Native American history. It was really, really interesting to me, and to be honest, I wasn't aware of just how many different tribes there were. I'd only heard of the famous ones that everybody knows, like the Sioux and the Cherokee and stuff, but reading the books about it, I realized there's hundreds of different tribes, and very, very different, the difference between the Plains Indians and the more settled people. And it was really, really interesting. So I just came across it through popular culture.
I also want to amend something I said there, because my mother will be upset if I don't mention that we did learn in school that Ireland has no snakes. So
yes, St. Patrick drove them out, isn't that correct?
There you go. So that's so I guess I can't say we didn't learn anything in school. How important that is versus the Trail of Tears, I suppose, is probably not a very fair argument. You mentioned Nora just a minute ago. Nora Twomey and Paul Young, who I mentioned earlier, are the co-founders of Cartoon Saloon with you, and they're good friends that you've had for years. Mm-hmm. When you're running an animation studio where your friends are also serving as your business partners, as your creative partners, as your co-workers, do you ever find yourself in a situation where the personal relationship can, I suppose, rub up against the business relationship?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, by now, myself and Paul and Nora are well used to each other, and we're old friends, and we've been business partners now for 25 years. But in the early days, it could be really challenging. And I mean, I co-directed Wolfwalkers with one of my oldest friends, Ross Stewart, and that was, it was great, and it was difficult, because it's like a marriage, and there's times when it was intense and tense. And then there was other times when it went really easily and it was really nice. But yeah, for sure, it's a constant balance. And I do think stuff we didn't learn about in college, we didn't learn about business, and we didn't learn about the soft skills of working with a team. Like, we learned about animation, and we learned about, visual language and in-betweening and all that kind of stuff that we needed for a career as an animator. But to actually run a studio with a group of friends, there was a lot to learn on the job,
But that's pretty much the only way to learn it. I mean, do you feel like people who go into it with, let's say, a business school training are going to come out of it with a different result than people who just go into it like you and I did, just off the seat of our pants?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, after, I can't remember how long, for a while we had another friend, business partner, Ross Murray, who studied business and took care of the business side of things. Then at a certain point, he emigrated to France. He got married and moved to France, and we hired Jerry Sheeran, who had been the managing director of the Don Bluth studio in Ireland back in the 80s, and then he had his own studio for a while in the 90s, and then he came to work with us about 15 years ago now, and he brought a totally different mentality to the business that we really needed, and kind of made it a business rather than I used to joke we were like an animation club. We were barely a business, we were just a bunch of friends hanging out, getting jobs and trying to make a go of it. But when Jerry came in, he put a real structure on the business and built out the business team, the legal and all that side of things. So there was a lot of stuff that we'd been kind of trying to do by the seat of our pants, but that wasn't really our speciality. That it's been much better since we've had people who are specialised in that side of things taking care of it, you know. But you have to do it when you're starting out. You have to do it all. You have to figure it all out yourself. So it's kind of good that we did for a while. For the first 10 or 11 years, we really did have to figure out all the business side of things and understand all the contracts and everything that we were dealing with. And now, thankfully, we have a team taking care of that.
Take me back 25 years in that regard. When yours, and you've spoken plenty about how Cartoon Saloon started and so on and so forth, but the actual nebula that turned into the studio that we know today, was it a situation where you, Paul and Nora, were just sitting around and looked at each other and said, we should start a band? You know, how did it sort of go?
What it was I had been a member of Young Irish Filmmakers here in Kilkenny,
right.
And I knew that I could get a certain amount of funding to what we thought we could do through Young Irish Filmmakers is make our first film through Young Irish Filmmakers. And Paul and I had a studio on the side that we'd been doing. We'd kind of registered the name Cartoon Saloon as a way to invoice for different jobs and stuff. And so it was a pretty informal partnership. We just used the name Cartoon Saloon. So Cartoon Saloon and Young Irish Filmmakers were two separate things at the beginning. And the Secret of Kells, which was originally called Rebel, was the film that we were trying to make. Mm-hmm. And so we got some funding from Young Irish Filmmakers for the first year. It was basically the same as unemployment benefit, but it was but it was just a way to kind of keep the team together. There was about 10 of us who'd been to college together. Mm-hmm. And Cartoon Saloon was sort of paying half the salary and the other half was coming through Young Irish Filmmakers. And then as the company started it was very non-linear, let's say. It was very stop-start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I guess what happened was the studio itself, the Cartoon Saloon, we were kind of obliged, in order to make our first film, we were kind of obliged to be a limited company and to become a studio. So it was kind of a necessary evil, really, you know. It had been just a way to do little odd jobs on the side. And then it grew and grew over the first year that we were developing Secret of Kells. And then we kind of incorporated the company in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. So then we made a limited company, and then we had to do proper accounts and be serious and be a business, you know, properly.
The boring stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and then we eventually moved out of the Young Irish Filmmakers premises that we'd been renting some rooms from the Young Irish Filmmakers in their premises, and we moved in here to the building. But that wasn't until I think 2005. So there was a kind of a gradual, for me, there was a shift from being a teenager making films and stuff as a hobby, let's say, in Young Irish Filmmakers, to having a business, and then it becoming our full-time serious job. It was a kind of 5-year arc, you know.
And Young Irish Filmmakers was very important to you as a young artist. How does Cartoon Saloon, if in any way, give back to the people in that program now?
Well, what we used to do, one of our studio manager, Catherine, is on the board of Young Irish Filmmakers, mm-hmm. and we frequently have young people from that program coming and doing work experience here in the studio. So there's been a lot of talented young people that we've discovered have come up through Young Irish Filmmakers and then have done work experience or internships here and then become part of the team here in Cartoon Saloon.
That's really cool that you give back in that way.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and we're kind of friendly with the organisation. It's changing a lot over the years, but I'm glad to see it's still going, you know.
You once said that you'd tell a younger Tom, quote, not to doubt so much, unquote. Do you feel like you often doubt yourself?
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of, like anybody, I think, you know, you have a lot of, you second guess yourself, and you sometimes have bad days where you don't think you can draw anymore, or you don't know what you're doing, you know.
Or couldn't in the first place.
Yeah, you never could in the first place. And right now we're in the process of writing, like we have a draft and we're working on a second draft of the new film, and constant doubt. It's like, what are we doing? I'm going to get found out this time.
They'll finally know.
Yeah, they'll finally away with it 3 times. This time we'll get caught. This time they'll figure out that we're just frauds.
Yeah. So do you feel, in the same way that you look at your childhood differently now, in 25 years of Cartoon Saloon, Do you feel like the way you doubt yourself is different now than it was when you were first starting?
The personal doubt hasn't changed. The personal sort of sense of not being sure if you know what you're doing or if you're good enough to be doing it, and that doesn't really change so much. But I have much more faith and much more confidence in the studio itself, in the team that we've built up, in the expertise that we've built up. It doesn't have the same. It's not as kind of seat of the pants as it was in the early days. So I don't doubt the studio. I feel very confident that the studio can pull off a pretty nice job. You know, it's only myself that I'm a bit unsure about.
Well, at least the studio won't be the one to reveal that it was all a facade. You talk about doubt. I think failure is another thing that a lot of artists think is not bad per se, but a sign of a downward trajectory. I have a lot of confidence in the idea that failure is a great thing. Do you want to talk about, in 25 years of Cartoon Saloon, what you would consider your greatest failure?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. What we basically failed at when we were making Secret of Kells and Skunk Fu, we totally failed at planning for the future. We got totally caught up in those projects, and we nearly bankrupted ourselves making those projects as good as we could. And then we were totally bereft when Secret of Kells was finished and Skunk Fu was finished. The studio had grown to about 80 people, and we'd felt really on top of the world, and we'd managed to do a TV show and a feature film, which was a big ambition from early on. And then suddenly we were back down to about 10 people, and we didn't have any work, and we were out knocking on doors, and it was the time of the recession. The 2008 recession had started, and that was a big failure, and we had to turn to family and friends to give us loans and stuff to keep the studio open around then. So that was probably the big crunch that probably would have finished off another studio, but we kept going.
There you go. But that's just the thing. I mean, from whence comes a great sense of initiative and inspiration is failure. Do you find that failure motivates you?
Oh yeah, it has to. Yeah, well, it would be easy to be disheartened every time you fail at something. So I suppose you have to turn it around and use it as motivation. You know.
You mentioned the Secret of Kells and those early days working on it. When you were working on the Secret of Kells at the beginning, you were also running a blog on the internet. You were running this terrific blog that was updating people with how it was being done. People from Pixar, people from animation studios all across the world were sort of following along and really loving it. Do you feel, especially since, as you mentioned, the studio began in 2000, which is firmly in the digital age, do you feel that the internet has helped your work and your studio?
Massively. There was a lot of doubt, and Nora and Paul weren't sure if I should be keeping the blog, or they were afraid I was sharing too much, but they soon realised that it was spreading the word in the industry, which was really important. It really helped establish us, and for awards and things like that, people were aware of us that mightn't have been aware of us otherwise. But also the internet, I mean, all our films since the very beginning were co-productions, and so we were able to do those co-productions much more seamlessly in the early days, it was Skype, and we had production software that we could share to work with other studios. So as much as I traveled to those other studios to work with the teams there, the fact that we were connected by the internet really made it possible. So, like, even though we were even Secret of Kells was all on paper, it was pretty traditional. There was only 2 computers in this room. Now we draw everything on Cintiqs, and there's a lot of, anything we do on paper gets scanned and coloured. But even Secret of Kells, even though it was all on paper, it really, it was animated in 5 different countries, and that required shipping paper all around, and lots of internet, lots of connection, lots of emails, lots of Skype calls, and with the supervisors in the different studios. So yeah, I think we're really a product of the internet. That for fact we were able to run a animation studio and have an impact internationally from a small town in the middle of Ireland is something that could only happen in the age of the internet, I think.
You've doubtlessly seen that indie animation has really blown up over the internet in those past 25 years as well. and people's entire careers making TV shows and making movies have come from them beginning by just making flash cartoons or silly stuff that they'd post on the internet or Newgrounds or something. Do you consider Cartoon Saloon an indie studio?
Oh yeah, we're still indie. We're not owned by any bigger company. It's just me, Paul, and Nora who own it, and all of our productions are either jobs for hire, where we do something like My Father's Dragon, where it's all paid for by Netflix, but the most of the work we do is indie international co-productions, where we put the finance together in between Ireland and France and other European countries and get them made in a very indie way, and then afterwards we might sell the rights to international distributors like Apple or Netflix. But the way they're financed and the way they're made in the first place is very independent. We're not as ruggedly independent as some of the filmmakers you're talking about that are just doing stuff online and then surviving by Patreon and Kickstarters and stuff, but we're some kind of maybe middle ground.
Well, that's because you guys have W-2s and they don't. Are there W-2s in Ireland? I don't know if that makes sense.
What are W-2s?
like what you get from the federal government for your taxes.
Oh yeah, tax incentives. Yeah,
I might have just Americanized myself a little too embarrassingly. The idea then of, because we talked about Irish folklore bristling up against your own personal expression, are you implying then that you never feel that somebody like Netflix or Apple or the idea, like Lucasfilm even with the Star Wars work, never bristles up against your idea of staying as an indie studio?
We're very careful when we pick our partners that they understand that that's our main ambition, is to, tell brave stories, and we want to kind of that independent. So we've always managed to find partners that seem to understand that. There's been times when it bristles, especially when you're working for a big corporation like that. It can be difficult, but they're always we do those projects and they pay pretty well, and they can fund more of our own indie projects on the back of them. So that's kind of the model that when we do work for hire like that for a big company, we try to find partners that want us to do what we do, that want to see what we do. And as the years have gone on, that's gotten easier. In the early days, very often you would have been asked to emulate another popular studio or another popular style. But since we kind of made our own mark with the indie productions, now when we do those productions, generally speaking, those corporations understand that they're paying for us to do something like what we do independently.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to have the BAFTAs and the Academy Award nominations.
Professional armor, yeah.
When you look at the way that your work is perceived, speaking of BAFTAs and stuff, when you look at the way that your work is perceived in Europe, and especially the United Kingdom, versus, I don't know, Africa or here in the United States or something, do you find that people appreciate it in a different way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was really fascinating to me to see, it's really strange. Like in America, there's a huge Irish-American audience that I hadn't counted on. And that was maybe the start of me realizing that our stuff traveled better outside of Ireland internationally. And then there's stuff I just can't explain, like Song of the Sea inexplicably was a big hit in China. It was really popular in China.
Really?
And I don't know why or anything, but it just did really well there.
Yeah, why not?
And then similarly, I'll get messages from people in Iran or Japan and all sorts of places that are inspired by our stuff. And I can't really tell you why they're connecting with it. I hope it's just the universal messages in the stories and the artwork and everything that people connect with. But yeah, definitely we're seen in a different light in Ireland than we are. I think people are proud of us now here, but early on, I think it took a while for Irish people to wake up to the fact that what we were doing was interesting, because there's a cringe factor, I think, with Irish films and stuff. Irish people are always like, oh, is it any good? Oh, I'm not sure it's any good. And then when it gets kind of celebrated in the States or elsewhere internationally, Irish people kind of come back towards it and go, oh, maybe it is good. If they liked it in America, maybe it is working.
It's been validated. Exactly.
Validated, yeah.
I suppose that at first Joyce was a little worried about how Ulysses would be perceived by the Americans.
Exactly.
or to a lesser extent, Bono. Do you, in that regard then, do you look at the work that you create as something that Irish people themselves can be seen through or understood through?
Don't really think about it that much, I guess. I'm just coming from my own point of view, but I hope that the younger generation of Irish kids that watch these films can see themselves in it in a way that I didn't have when I was growing up. There wasn't the same kind of level of Irish animation or Irish storytelling that was happening. There was a couple of films from when I was young that stayed with me for a long time, and I guess they were important to me because they represented Ireland on screen in a way. I mean, there was a movie called Into the West that came out when I was about 11 or 12, and it really stuck with me because it was a family film and it was well produced and well made, but it was set in Ireland and it was about the travelling community in Ireland and stuff, and that really stood out to me because it was unusual to see an Irish family movie like that, and I guess kids these days have more input coming from all over the world, so I think it makes it all the more special to have something that's coming from Ireland,
Well, especially from the United Kingdom. I mean, I know Peppa Pig is enormous as well.
Yeah,
of course, exactly. That's not Ireland, but
Yeah. Well, we have our own. We Puff and Rock, which is our preschool series, and I'm really proud of that because it has Irish accents and celebrates Irish wildlife, but it's enjoyed all over the world. Thankfully, it's on Netflix, so it gets seen everywhere. There's even a Japanese version of Puff and Rock. So.
Well, I actually wanted to ask about that because Peppa Pig, British, Bluey, Australian, and there's sort of this joke online about how people who watch these shows as little kids, they grow up and they sort of emulate the accent. Have you ever heard of anybody watching Puff and Rock and emulating the accents?
Not yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Yeah, we're on the 3rd season and we've done a feature film, and there's a Puff and Rock visitor centre up in Belfast and stuff, so I guess there's several generations of the kids that are growing up on those Northern Irish accents,
Yeah. So it's all part of your plan for global domination, is what you're saying.
Global domination, that's what I'm
Naturally. What does animation mean to you? It's obvious that animation is very important in your life. You even went to an animation studio on your honeymoon, but how important, what does animation mean to you as a person?
I think for me it's been an amazing doorway to the rest of the world, or window to the rest of the world. I mean, it's more than I ever imagined it would be or could be. It's been a community. The animation community is very warm, and kind of anywhere I go in the world to go to animation festivals, you feel like you're with people that you have a lot in common with and stuff. And as a medium, I just think it's a language that allows you to tell stories in a way that you can't tell in any other way. It's a different language that you can deal with. I suppose things are getting closer together where live action is so full of CG, and CG can look so much like hand-drawn. Yeah. But I still think there's something about hand-drawn animation that allows you to naturally tell certain types of stories easier than you would in any other medium, So, and the reason I got into it in the first place was I wanted to draw for a living, so it was a way to make a living as a draftsperson,
To that extent, I think that you and Nora and Paul deserve a lot of credit because your work has really rejuvenated a lot of people's interest in 2D, and not just 2D in the very realistic way that something like Aladdin is, but in this beautifully stylized way that draws a lot from the graphic arts. Especially as somebody who went to animation college themselves, your films are taught and shown and always referenced, and people say, I want it to look like the girl's hair in Kells or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, it's true, and they didn't just pay me to say that. But if you're hiring, although the other thing I have to say is that in animation school, there is few things more envied than the name Cartoon Saloon, and I don't mean the quality of the product, because the quality of the product is terrific, but people look at the literal name Cartoon Saloon and kick themselves saying, how did I not come up with that amazing pun? Every single day
sometimes we cringe about it a bit because it could sound a bit goofy or something, but yeah, we came up with that in college.
I dispel all notion of it being cringy. It is the most ingenious title ever, and everybody's jealous of it.
Great, that's good news.
Kick myself. I could find something that snappy. If only I could come up with something that good. Oh wow.
There's a Choctaw painter who works with us here, and he said if he had an animation studio, he'd call it the Animation Reservation.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I suppose I'm close with Animation Education Association, but
yeah, you're getting there. Yeah, you got it.
Nora and Paul again are very important people in Cartoon Saloon, and I would imagine very important people in your life as well. I was wondering if you could say a few words about either of them. I was wondering if you could say a few words about Paul. Who is Paul to you?
Oh, well, Paul and Nora are two of my best friends. Paul has only recently started directing. He's directing his first feature film at the moment. He directed the short for Star Wars. Prior to that, he was the producer for the studio, so he was the one who was going out and shaking hands and kissing babies and making deals. And we used to call him Paul Hollywood Young, because he was the one that was always out there in the markets and stuff. So I'm really happy to see him now blossoming as a director in his own right. And he was always a fantastic artist. Like when I met him in school, in animation school, we all used to pass around Paul's portfolio. We were all such fans of his natural drawing style. And then Nora, I suppose, is much more, she's more than me and Paul. She's really immersed in filmmaking. She loves editing, and and Paul and Nora are more like actors. Paul is, they do all the scratch voices and stuff for a lot of her films, and Paul acted on stage and stuff. And so I feel like Nora's she's much more into the nitty gritty of like story and editing and all that stuff. And she's a brilliant drafts person, but she doesn't draw as much anymore. She's more focused on writing and editing and that kind of stuff. And she's been a absolute rock for me over the years. So she's always the person we turn to get story notes, to get feedback on the scripts and the story and the characters and stuff like that. She's always really strong on that. She always has strong opinions and strong feedback that helps guide the writing process.
And when you turn to them, and I suppose you answered it a little bit with Nora, but when you turn to Paul and Nora, what do you get from either of them individually? How much inspiration or what strength or what do you draw from them?
Paul was always just massively encouraging. He was just always somebody that kind of kept reminding me of the excitement of the fact that we were actually making a film and that it was going to be great. When I was lost in self-doubt and stuff, Paul would often be the optimist that could see the best case scenario, that how it could work out. So he was fantastic like that. He was always a very positive force in the studio. And then, like I said with Nora, mostly she's brilliant on animation and everything, on all the different departments and stuff, but mostly on story and in the animatic stage. That's when Nora really helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned that you do a lot of work even still with the Young Ireland filmmakers, and of course you are in many ways, and not to make you blush or anything, the head of, or rather the face, of Irish animation. Are there any people in Ireland making great animated work right now that you'd like to single out?
Oh yeah, there's so much brilliant stuff happening. I mean, there's big studios like Brown Bag and Boulder in Dublin. They're doing really great stuff. But then there's some smaller studios like Alan Holly makes beautiful work. His studio is called the Maps and Plans. I'm really a fan of Paper Panther. They do a lot of kind of stop motion. Evan McNamara used to be part of Paper Panther, and he did all the Wolf Vision in Wolfwalkers and stuff like that. So he's a filmmaker in his own right, and he does some beautiful stuff. Carl Friedman, and there's so many young talents. I'd be remiss. I'd miss somebody. I know there's really interesting stuff happening with Studio Mala. There's lots of new small studios popping up, and they're all really exciting in different ways, and they're all doing different things. So it's an exciting time for Irish animation. Yeah.
It is a good time to be in Irish animation. We started the conversation here by shouting out Smittix. I suppose in the same way that we shouted out Irish animation, I'm going to have to ask if you have a specific ale that you want to shout out that people outside of Ireland might not be privy to.
Oh no, we'll stick with Smittix. Smittix is the good stuff. Yeah.
Smittix, my information is in the description of the video if you'd like to reach out for sponsorship opportunities. Cartoon Saloon can be reached at this address.
Our studio is in the maltings. That used to be where they kept all the malt and barley and stuff for the brewery, for the Smittix brewery. So our actual studio was originally part of the Smittix brewery.
Squatters' rights. You already have...